he he was a good boss. We lived there. Somebody in our family was there for years.
Yeah. Somebody in your family?
Chris. Started with Chris, I think. Paul just a little bit. Paul was always off somewhere else.
Yeah.
But Chris, he started. And then Clark started after him. Then I came after Clark.
Yeah. So when did Clark start going by George?
Go to what?
When did he go by the name George? Clark.
Clark? Well, Clark was, I think, a old grandpa's name from Mom's side of the family.
Yeah.
I think Clark was. Or might have been they just named him Clark because George was, I think, the people's name. His grandpa's name, anyway, on Mom's side. But
So it was George Clark?
I never knew. I knew him, but not really to remember what it looked like. I knew. Yeah, don't know.
So would that have been your grandpa?
Yeah, George Clark Evans. Just Emery Evans. They wanted somebody named after Dad. Dad was just Emery.
Yep. And you never had a middle name.
Huh?
You never had a middle name.
That's right. No, that's why.
Because your dad didn't have one.
He didn't have one. That's right.
Yeah.
They wanted one named after Dad. That was down the road. Paul was also named Emery. There's a Paul Emery and an Emery Evans.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Brothers.
Paul's middle name was Emery?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. But then later, when I was born, they wanted somebody named after Dad.
Yeah.
Exactly. So they
The same.
decided
So
to name me Emery anyway.
Emery Evans Jr., but they always called you Junior.
Yeah, Paul Emery.
Paul Emery, and
Paul
then
Emery was his name. He went by Paul.
and then Chris was next. What was his middle name?
Christopher. He was Christopher. Christopher Arliss Evans.
Arliss?
Yeah.
Where did that come from?
Well, an old family name on Mom's side.
Yeah.
It came from that, as I recall. Anyway, that's the way it was.
Yeah. And then after that was George Clark.
George Clark.
And then
Emery, just Emery.
Just plain Emery, but they called you
Dad didn't
Junior.
have a middle name, so I didn't get a middle name.
Junior, and then your next brother was Larry.
Larry.
And what was his middle name?
Larry. Was it Evans? No, let's see. Larry. I can't remember.
Yeah, I don't remember either.
He had a name, I know that.
Yeah, he had a middle name. I just can't remember what it was. But so you're the only living brother now.
Yeah, as far as I know, I am. Yep.
And then what sisters are still living?
Well, Jane, I think, is still living.
Jane.
And
her wasn't her name Sarah Jane?
Ruth, I believe, is still living. Huh?
Wasn't Jane's name Sarah Jane? Was her first name Sarah?
Jane?
Yeah.
Abby.
Oh, Abby?
Abby Jane Evans.
Abby Jane Evans. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And then was Betty next?
Betty something, I've forgotten what it was.
Yeah.
Betty Jane? It might have been Betty Jane, but I'm not sure.
But she always went by Betty.
Yeah.
And Jane never went by Abby.
Hmm?
Jane never was called Abby.
Well, one or two of the relatives or sisters called her Abby.
Really?
But outside of that, no. Her name is Abby Jane, and that's what she went by mostly.
Yeah. And then after Jane, then came Betty, and then after Betty was Ruth.
Betty Ruth. Yeah.
What was Ruth's middle name?
I don't know. Betty Ruth, I think.
Really? Well, you already had a Betty.
Huh?
She already had a sister named Betty.
Well, I might have had two of them.
Ruth?
No, I don't think so. Not on the girl's side.
And then after George got married to a woman named Ruth, they called her Little Ruthie.
Yeah.
She was always Little Ruthie.
Yeah, that's right.
Because George's Ruth. That was George's Ruth and Little Ruthie. That's the way everyone...
That's right. I was Emery Jr. I think, and then Paul was Paul Emery.
Yeah, that's something. I never knew that.
Mm-hmm.
But when you went to North Dakota, when you went there to harvest,
yeah,
the old man and his wife always wanted an Evans to come.
Yeah, well, gosh, yes. They loved Evans at work. He's the best worker they ever had.
Did they say that you were the best stackers of hay, too? You stacked the hay. What'd they say?
Took me right on. Well, I got there, I was up during the war. They were really short on hand.
Yeah.
And he called my dad or wrote him, I've forgotten which. I think he did maybe both. He called, said, if you can, and George was already up there.
George was already in North Dakota?
Yeah. And told him I was there, if I might be able to come and help. I was still in high school.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And the old man said, yes. And so he called Dad and said, send him up here and I'll look for him on the train and watch for him and make sure I get him off.
Where did the train go to?
Well, the train went north from Kansas City. I rode it to St. Paul, Minnesota.
Oh.
And changed trains at St. Paul. And they had instructions to conductor in that train, make sure I was on it, and he got off of the train. And he came through looking for Emery Evans. When he got me, come with me.
Conductor was in charge.
He made sure I got off, and he got me with the conductor of the other train. This kid goes to North Dakota. You make sure he gets off at Fargo, North Dakota.
Yeah.